Good morning and welcome to the Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee meeting. Welcome to everybody watching at home. The meeting today is open to the public. Appendices 1 and 3 to the reported item 13 are not available to the public and press because they contain exempt information. If members wish to discuss information in these documents, we will need to ask members of the public to kindly leave that part of the meeting and we will pause the webcast. The meeting will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. And it is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast the meeting, though I don't see them, I'm going to say. We have received no petitions and 6 public questions. Please can I request that mobile phones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. So let's do introductions. I'm Councillor Joe Watson, member for Dawn Totley and chair of this committee.
Councillor Alexi Diamond, Green Party spokesperson on this committee.
Mike Chaplin, Councillor for Southey Ward.
Councillor Shonid Richards, Councillor for Manor Castle Ward.
Keep going, keep going.
Councillor Mark Jones, Deputy Chair of the Committee.
Christine Gilligan-Kubo, I'm a councillor for Hillsborough Ward, a member of the committee.
Councillor Tim Hagan, councillor for Crooks and Crossbow.
Councillor Sue Alston, councillor for Fulwood.
Thank you. And officers first on my left.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah Bennett, Assistant Director of Legal Services.
Good morning, Richard Eyre, Director of Street Scene and Regulations.
Rachel Appleyard, Principal Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. So item 2, exclusion of press and public. As I said earlier, there are closed appendices to item 13. So please, members, do not refer to anything in those appendices without first allowing the meeting to be closed. Sorry, item 1, apologies for absence. I understand we've had apologies from Tony Downs. The rest of us appear to be here, so that will be it. Sorry, yes. Item 2, exclusion of press and public, as previously announced. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting, page 11 of the pack. Any comments on these? There is the question that of the petition received last time. There has been no meeting with the people who asked for a letterbox. Obviously, that offer is still open. I'm not entirely sure what correspondence has been undertaken with them, but if you're watching, the offer is still there. Okay. Can we agree those minutes as an accurate record?
Agreed,
Thank
Chair.
you. That's agreed. Okay. Item 6, members' questions. There have been no members' questions. Oh, so item 5. Oh dear, I'm in a hurry today. Item 5, public questions and petitions. So we have questions from David Cronshaw. Is David Cronshaw here? Okay, if not, those answers will be provided in writing. I would just like to say the first question is about the loss of revenue that arises from the green permit scheme. I think this is an issue that I've raised, and I think we do need to look at this. But let's just leave that as a question for the moment. Questions from Russell Johnson. Is Russell Johnson here? No, I believe that covers all the questions. Okay, so those questions will be given written answers. Members' questions. There are no members' questions. Right. Work programme. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So the work programme details all the known substantive items for forthcoming meetings of the committee. This is the last meeting of the 2023-24 cycle, and the dates for the 24-25 cycle will be confirmed at the annual business meeting in May. However, you'll see on the work programme that we have put provisional items for that first meeting, which is likely to be in June. There's no significant changes. There's a couple of reports that have been moved to the June meeting and one that's been changed to a knowledge briefing. They're outlined in part 1 on page 24. And I'll hand over to officers to answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from members? No, good. Okay, I mean, it's worth saying, obviously, the next meeting will be the next civic year. There may be changes to the membership of the committee. There will be, I think, the intention is there will be a work planning session for the new members of the committee after the elections. And there is also, officers have done a lot of work, I know, on a planning session for the operation of the portfolio. So if you get an invitation to that, do please go along, because obviously the officers would like input from members in that, which will probably be related to the work programme for the committee. Okay, is that work programme agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Item 8, parking fees and charges, amendment to the Sunday tariff. Officers, would like to come and introduce yourselves and present this item.
Thank you, Chair. Morning. My name is Sabia Hanif. I'm the Parking Services Manager, and I'm going to present the report for amendment for the parking fees for a Sunday tariff. The purpose of the report is to seek some minor amendment for the city centre Sunday evening pay and display tariff introduced as part of the wider parking fees and charges report decision at the Waste and Street Scene Committee on 14th of February, which was last month. The Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee is recommended to approve to apply the following amendment to the city centre evening tariff on a Sunday only. The evening tariff applies from 4:30 till 8:30 in the evening. For Zone 1, to apply the existing rate of £1.45 per hour or a £2 flat rate for more than an hour for that evening session. Zone 2 and off-street car parks introduce a new rate of £1 for an hour and a £2 flat rate for more than an hour's parking for that evening session. Just to provide a bit of a background information, the last month the Waste and Street Scene Committee agreed to increase the city centre Sunday charges as part of a stepped process to align the fees from Monday to Saturday tariff as part of Monday to Saturday tariffs. The tariff increased to £2 per hour in Zone 1 on-street and £1 per hour in Zone 2 on-street, as well as the off-street car parks. The decision also introduced the application of the existing Monday to Saturday evening tariff to the new Sunday charges. The evening tariff applies from 4:30 to 8:30 and has been in place for a number of years on a Monday to Saturday to support the early evening economy by providing a reduced parking rate at a time when there is a lower demand for pay and display spaces. Applying the evening charge to a Sunday's new tariff in Zone 2 on-street and the off-street car parks increases the hourly rate for the first hour from £1 to £1.45. This is the opposite to the objective of providing a reduced rate to users of the evening tariff, evening economy. The proposal is therefore designed to rectify this, so the report is proposing for Zone 1, apply the existing rate of £1.45 per hour or the £2 flat rate for more than an hour. Zone 2 and off-street car parks introduce a new rate of £1 for an hour and £2 flat rate for more than an hour's parking. In terms of the Section 2, how does the decision contribute? Amending the Sunday tariff in Zone 2 and off-street car parks will help to meet the objective of supporting the city centre early evening economy at a time when there is a lower parking demand. In terms of the consultation, the Council is not required to consult on straightforward changes to the prices and only prices including within the tariff, but a legal notice will be published in the local newspaper giving at least 21 days notice of the changes being implemented. Copies of the legal notice will also be posted in the car parks covered by the new tariffs. In terms of the implications, there are no significant inequality implications rising from this report. In terms of the financial, it is noted that there will be potentially small loss of income for introducing the evening tariff on a Sunday. However, this decision was made at the last committee. Obviously, legal implications are listed there, similar to the last report. In terms of the climate, there's no significant climate implications rising from this report. Alternative options were considered, so the council could maintain the current evening tariff, but with the information available, these are not thought to be appropriate or proportionate to achieve the aims of the proposed increases. And if the committee could consider the proposed recommendations listed within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So, my summary of that is obviously we made the main decision at the last meeting on the parking tariffs. We attempted to avoid an anomaly when it comes to Sunday evenings, and we didn't quite succeed in avoiding that anomaly, which is why this has come back to us to correct that. Questions or comments from members? Mike.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair. I welcome the report, and it puts right in an anomaly, and I think it would be welcomed by everyone.
Thank you. Did I see any other hands? No. Okay, can we take this, can we agree these recommendations?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you. That report is agreed. Okay. Item 9, Q3 budget monitoring. If you can introduce yourself and the report. Thank you.
Bit dodgy about the microphone, isn't it? I should have sat there. Hi, I'm Jane Wilby, Head of Accounting. I'm here to present the Q3 budget monitoring position for 23-24. So the paper gives an update on the position for Q3 for the General Fund. The full paper is taken to Finance Committee next week, which includes all of the committee budgets and all the appendices as well. This is a shortened version for the Waste Committee. The headlines of the overall council position are that we're forecasting a overspend of 16.7 million against a net revenue budget of 493 million, which is a 3.4% variance. At Q2, we presented an overspend of 17.4 million to committee, so it's moved by 700k between the quarters, but we did see a big movement in education, children and families of over 2 million, and this was due to increased cost of placements and a risk of the income that we're receiving at our in-house provision at Aldine House due to restrictions on capacity. We've also seen additional costs for home-to-school transport for SEN pupils. We've seen this been offset by some income that we have seen in adults, offsetting some expenditure that's already in the accounts, plus some underspends in youth, improvements in property services, and further investment income from our commercial investments. Not commercial investments, sorry, our cash investments. The three main areas of overspend for the council, consistent throughout the year, it's been the same sort of story that you've heard. It's adults, children's and homelessness. Adults are continuing to be challenged but have an ambitious recovery plan to continue the strength-based reviews and work with health partners for creative commissioning activities to reduce those package costs. In children's, the big problems really are around placements and the placement costs increasing. We don't have a huge amount of supply in the city and a shortage of foster carers. We've also got huge home-to-school transport costs, which again have increased in the quarter. The homelessness situation, this has kind of arisen post-lockdown, and we've had sort of rising expenditure in this area this year, and this is where we're using hotel bed and breakfast accommodation to support temporary accommodation, and we're not able to recover the full subsidy from the DWP. So in spite of the emerging challenges that have come forward this year, the £47 million worth of savings targets we put in place, we are 77% on track to deliver those. There is, however, an underlying pressure in our accounts which does need to be addressed, and we cannot continue to be using one-off grant income or provisions. They have provided some relief, but it's not sustainable. They need to be addressed so that we can be sustainable going forward. And the majority of that overspend is in our three key areas of adults, children's and homelessness. In the Waste Committee, there's a £1 million underspend. And this is largely due to the higher income that we've received in parking services, which is offsetting some of overspends in markets, environmental regs and city centre budgets. So the committee net revenue budget is 68 million, but has a spend of over 150 million. So really demonstrates good financial management with variance against budget. And also that £1 million is contributing towards the bottom line to mitigate some of the overspend to bring it down to that 16.7 position. Nationally, the issues in Sheffield are not unique, and councils across the country are experiencing the same challenges. The latest budget last week offered no solutions from central government for the pressures that we do face, so we are going to have to take action locally to tackle the issues. In terms of our reserve position, we've talked about a 70 million contingency reserve that we set aside in 2021. Of that, we've drawn down 2 years for deficits, and we will have 13 million remaining at the end of the year. So given that position, we've identified a surplus from our collection fund, so we're able to top up some of that reserve this year, and that was agreed as part of the budget last week. So that reserve will be taken up to approximately 25 million if we do hit approximately 17 million overspend this year. Our medium-term financial analysis is 61 million gap over the next 4 years. And the good news is we have balanced the budget for next year, which was agreed at full council last week, and it provided the details of the savings targets needed for next year. The savings targets are lower than we've seen in previous years, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. We still need to consolidate on delivering those budget savings that we needed from previous years to make sure that that gap doesn't widen. So the committee is just asked to note the financial position at Q3, and the final outturn position will be presented to the committees in the June committee. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. I think that's all, Mark.
Yeah, it's more just a comment, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you, Jane, for all your work this year in helping us get through the budget. It's never easy, but it is definitely been done in a very professional manner with your input. And I'd like to thank the committee for working together in a collegiate way to make sure that we've got to the position where we are managing our budget well and attempting to address the services that the city wants in a way that we believe the city need it. So all in all, I think it's been quite a constructive year, and I welcome the progress we've made. One thing I was thinking is on page 47, 1.7.3, there's an amber element to the budgets going forward, and it's specifically with reference to longer term parking. Not for this one, I didn't want to propose it for the work programme going forward for next year just yet, but I do think that at some stage the council's going to have to address the fact that we'll be getting more people living in the city centre, and that will have implications for parking and other infrastructure things. So I look forward to seeing that come forward at some point to see how we can better address the citywide housing plan and how we're going to help accommodate all those new residents and their vehicles and such like. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, the amber saving on Milton Street car parking is something I kind of think we asked for to be looked at a year and a half ago. So I'm not quite sure why it's still amber, why we can't work out whether we can do it or not. But it's not a question for you, I don't think, Jane. It's something for us to take away and in our discussions. So yeah, I'm sorry, I did see Tim. Tim, did you have a question?
Can I just clarify that our more measured approach to closing the gap with the markets, that's all embedded into this and future savings we've made from the committee, because, you know, we're under a slight pressure to make sure that we close the gap more quickly, but we took a more measured approach, and that's all built into this budget and our underspend anyway. Is that correct?
Richard might be able to provide further context on that, but in terms of the overall plan for the markets, you will have seen the increases in fees coming forward, and that's to make sure that we are, you know, moving towards a cost recovery position in future years, and that assumption has been built into the overall budget gap, you know, to make sure that we're covering that in the assumptions in the medium-term financial analysis. So the savings and the uplift in fees and charges have been incorporated into next year. Again, if we're not doing that, I'm sure that Richard will comment on that further.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, so Jane's absolutely right. So part of this, you'll know from the flash reports, the markets are consistently overspending. So we're having to subsidise them. It's around 230k in the latest figures per year. So service charge is bridging that gap, so what we should be charging and getting to that gap. So members have rightly agreed to start bringing that gap closer and closer. So we will still be slightly overspent next year, but the service charge conversation is about bridging that gap. So it's not included in the forward plan. It's about getting the pressures from the in-year budget sorted first.
Tim, does that answer your question? I mean,
I think so. The more measured approach, and given the underspend of the committee, then the more measured approach we decided to take as from the council, so that we weren't impacted, does seem to hopefully hasn't massively adversely affected our financial position, where we're actually underspending in this as part of this remit, which I think is a good thing.
yeah, I mean, I'm not clear from the answers what planning assumptions in the medium term have been made about that recovery, or exactly how we go about it. But I think that we've carried a historic overspend on that, and we have started to address it. So I think, you know, we're moving in the right direction on markets. You know, market traders are successful businesses that should be able to pay their way, but at the same time, we are right to be cautious that we ensure that it remains successful, because the last thing we need is for markets to start doing badly. Alexi.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, and thanks to all the officers for all your work in making sure that we do have a balanced budget in waste and street scene. In fact, you know, 1 million underspend, which is really good to support the rest of the council in really difficult times. But I would just say a bit of caution that we can't continue to rely on sort of excess income in parking, and that parking income should be used for transport improvements and in order to address problems with our transport, and increase use of public transport, increase road safety, increase things like reducing air pollution, and we should be using transport income in that way. So it is really important that we continue to review fees and charges on a routine basis, and make sure that we get to cost recovery across all of our services in waste and street scene, whether it's environmental regs or taxi fees, and of course the market fees that we've already discussed. So yeah, just want all that to be sort of built in to be routine every year, and more officer powers to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. I think it was a comment, really, wasn't it? Okay. Tim, did you want to come back there?
It was something Mark said about that we've got to look at parking in the city centre with the growth in numbers. One of the things that this council is going to have to approach, and I don't know whether it's this committee or TRC, is looking at car clubs and proper investment in that, because with the best will in the world, you know, we can say we want people to use public transport, but when they want to go and visit relatives, if we can get them away from car use, that they will want to go and see their granny who lives in the middle of nowhere on a Sunday afternoon, and other times, that if there are proper investment in car clubs, and we've got to look at that. I don't know whether it's this committee or whether it's TRC that will have to look at that, but that's we've got to have some real investment in looking at how we're going to make sure that this is something that we really act upon, and get people bought into using it at an early stage as the houses are built, because once they've got their own cars in the city centre, then it's very difficult for them to relinquish them, whereas we're looking at making sure that car clubs are set up and that sort of thing, so that people can have shared use of cars for other things. And we've got to look at that, and we've got to build that into our factor that into how we operate as a city, particularly in the centre.
Thanks, Tim. A point well made, although it does stray from the topic of this report, indeed from the remit of this committee, as you said. It would be a matter for TRC to see the role of car clubs in the context of a wider transport strategy. I'm going to ask Jane. Sorry, thank you. Again, as the others have said, thank you for doing this report, for all the work on our budget. I did say yesterday at SNR that we clearly have the best officers in the council, because we have the best performance against the budget in the council. So well done to everybody for that. But I am going to put to you the same question I put to Philip Gregory yesterday, which is this budget amendment that has agreed an extra 109,000 to be spent on fly tipping, and had also agreed that there will be £109,000 by increasing penalties for fly tipping. This has been agreed by full council. I spoke at full council saying, look, I'm not sure it will raise that money, but full council in its wisdom decided that it would. Given that it did that, I don't see how we can gainsay it. I don't think it's in our place to gainsay the wisdom of full council, and therefore, surely, we operate on the assumption that the increase, we agreed to increase the penalties as budgeted for, and we operate on the assumption that money will be raised, and therefore we plan to spend 109k on tackling fly tipping, litter and whatnot. Which we can do, which we can certainly make good use of that money to improve the city's environment. And so I want to put it to you that that's what we should do. We should plan to spend this money, and we should plan to raise it, but we don't wait until we've raised it before we spend it. In fact, if we spend it effectively enough, we might get even less revenue from fly tipping, because there might be less fly tipping, which would be marvellous, wouldn't it? I've seen your hand, Mark, as well, but can I put that to you first, Jane? Thank you.
I would always advise a cautious approach to not spending money before you've received it. However, I think we need to sort of think about, you know, the overall accounting for that. And yes, absolutely, of course, we will ensure that any extra funding that we're receiving through increased fees is going to be ring-fenced, and we're going to be reinvesting that. And officers will obviously support that decision. But in terms of being speculative about that, I think just given the current financial climate and where we're at as the council, I would obviously, you know, advise against being a bit too speculative in terms of the amount of investment that we're going to be making from this committee. And to be operating within the overall financial envelope, it may be more prudent to assess sort of, you know, a couple of months down the line to see what the income looks like for that. And obviously, you know, officers can be working internally to develop some forecasting around that, so that we can provide a little bit more intelligence on what sort of levels of activity that would look like. I'm sure Richard would agree.
But let me push back on that. I will come to you in a second, Mark. The full council has agreed a budget. It's agreed a budget that we can spend on fly tipping. That's not contingent on anything. It's no more contingent than any other line in that budget. Is it legally? It's why say we can't spend it until we've raised it for that bit of the budget and not for any other bit of the budget?
I think I'm just pointing out that the proposal is also a spending proposal and a savings proposal. So it's contingent upon the saving being realised. So yes, the budget for expenditure is agreed, but there is also an income target that has also been agreed, which is why I'm just advising a bit more of a cautious approach to that.
I fully appreciate, and I should have said this, I do appreciate you're quite right to advise caution and prudence at all times. Mark?
Not one necessarily to go down the cautious or prudent approach myself. No, I welcome the intention and the obvious steer that full council gave, which is that we're not prepared to tolerate environmental crime, and if putting up the fines helps deter people, so be it. I am really mindful that we're not spending it on fly tipping to prevent fly tipping. However, I am really mindful that we've always had an issue here, in so much that if we get better at deterring fly tippers, then we get less fly tippers. At some point, I think the council needs to reconcile itself with the fact that we may need to deliver greater provision to tackle environmental crime than we need, and what will raise in revenue from tackling environmental crime. Because we want to be in that position where we've got enough people to deter people fly tipping. Yeah, we do need those people in place, or else they will fly tip, because they'll feel they can do it with impunity. So at some stage, we are going to have to address how we can get this sorted. And I would urge officers to get all those plans out of the bottom drawer that they've had collecting dust for a while, and actually start doing them. Start implementing them, because actually there's two elements here, as Jane rightly mentions. There will be potentially an increased revenue from fines, possibly, we don't know, but also there will be a saving because we won't be having to deal with those environmental crimes. So actually I think if we can be more bolder and assertive in our approach, then the better. And obviously this movement from full council does say we want officers to be bolder. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So this is, all hands have gone up now, so I've got Mike and then Alexei on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And if I can just begin to remind Mark that those plans will actually be on someone's laptop. They won't be gathering dust in the bottom of the drawer. I think we have to remind ourselves that the government changed the law on the maximum penalties that could be set for fly tipping. And that was done several months ago. And I was surprised to find that our own next door neighbour, Rotherham, has already acted at speed to go to the maximum in fines for fly tipping. And I think what we in Sheffield do not want to see is people coming, criminals, and there will be some in Rotherham, as there are in any town and city, taking advantage of the fact that Sheffield has a lower level of fines if they do get caught. So this is pragmatic, and it's sensible, and I think the people of Sheffield will understand the need for this, and why we brought in this budget amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. I wasn't meaning to raise the merits or demerits of the amendment. The amendment's been agreed, and therefore, you know, we embrace it. Alexei.
Thank you. I think it does raise a bit of a question about inconsistency from legal. I say this as somebody that voted for the amendment because I want to see more action on fly tipping. We've got particular problems in my ward with fly tipping. But in previous occasions when we've brought motions and we've had steers from officers that it needs to go to a committee for this decision because that comes under the remit of that committee. I don't know if it's because it was the budget and that goes through a different process or has different rules, but it's previously said, you know, this is a matter for strategy resources, so full council can only say ask strategy and resources to consider, which perhaps should have happened on this time, and we should have been considering it in Waste and Street Scene rather than that being decided by full council. However, I'm also of the view that full council is sovereign, so it should be able to take decisions, but I would like to see the rules consistently applied. Thank you.
I think I want to be clear that the budget decision is not an implementation decision. So full council can make decisions about setting the budget. To implement those decisions about setting the budget, that may well require decisions of the committees. I wasn't involved in this particular decision, so I wouldn't want to be saying now exactly what those decisions might be, but it is possible that in order to implement that budget decision, that decisions do need to come to this committee. Setting the budget is not the same as, so even if the budget for a particular pot of money, so we'll move away from the fines because I say I wasn't involved in that particular piece of advice, but if there's been an agreement in principle that an income generating budget will be increased as part of the budget, but that might still require a separate decision by the relevant committee to actually increase the relevant fees and charges in order to be able to achieve that raised income target. So there is a difference between full council agreeing a budget change and actually that decision being implemented. So I think that's probably where the difference comes, and it may well be that there is a further decision required from this committee, but as I say, I wasn't involved in that specific amendment.
Thank you for that. Now, that's a useful clarification. I'm conscious there isn't another meeting of this committee until June, which is quite some time away. There is a strategy and resources meeting in April. I don't know if that, if you know, I think we are duty bound to apply these increases to the penalties. Whether that can go to SNR in April just to give us an extra 6 weeks or whatever it is, over you know, waiting until Waste and Street Scene in June. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if I'm getting lots more hands now. Sue.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, Chair. Does that not mean it just needs to go on to our work programme for next year?
Possibly, Mike.
given what we now know from, thank you, Sarah, for that additional information. I wish we hadn't taken the work programme so early in the proceedings, because I think we need to reopen it and make sure that this appears very early on the agenda for Waston Street scene.
Richard, I don't know if you can comment on how we go about making this decision on the penalties.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's a really good point. We've got a session towards the end of this month to look at next financial year's work programme. I've already made a note. I spoke to Ian Ashmore, who's the Assistant Director for Environmental Regulations, about the fly tipping strategy. So you're absolutely right. We need to increase the enforcement, that sort of carrot and stick approach. So I think bringing it to a probably June, early Waston Street Scene Committee gives us some time to really get that fly tipping strategy together.
Yeah. Okay. I'm happy with that. Can we make sure that's on the work programme for June? Thank you. If that's agreed by members? Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Any final comments for? I know we've touched on a number of issues beyond the strictly financial, haven't we? But any final comments from Jane? Otherwise, can we agree this report? That's agreed. I'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane. The next item is item 10, Safety Certification, Safety Advisory Group Policy for Sports Stadia and Regulated Stadia. If officers would like to come to the table, introduce themselves and the report. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, councillors, officers. Thank you for the opportunity to present this report before you today. It deals with safety certification and the Safety Advisory Group policy in relation to sports stadia and regulated stands. That is, in no particular order of preference, Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United, Oleton and the Olympic Legacy Park. Brief potted history. Following an internal audit back in the last quarter of 2023, a recommendation was made to carry out a review into the existing Safety Advisory Group policy, and that review began towards the end of 2023. Current policy was originally devised in 2013 and has been periodically reviewed in the years since. Admittedly, not before this committee. I understand it went through licensing committee previously. In terms of this policy revision, it reflects changes in best practice and implements recommendations contained with the industry accepted document Guide to Safety at Sports Grounds. It also incorporates advice from the Sports Grounds Safety Authority, who have responsibility for monitoring both the council and stadium operators. Very briefly, major changes, notable additions to the policy include at section 2.6 the addition of a dispute resolution procedure, and that was a recommendation by the Sports Ground Safety Authority. Addition of a medical advisory group section reflecting updated best practice. It was felt that members that sat on the existing site didn't have the amount of medical expertise to be able to comment on certain things, so we've now inducted other experts onto that group. And at section 4.9, the addition of a supporters representative section, again reflecting best practice. It's recognised by the SAG and indeed the council that supporters do offer a valuable insight into safety at the sports grounds that they may attend. Now, another major change to the policy, as it was originally drafted in 2013, it also included a SAG process for the events that we hold in the city. Over the last 10 years, the processes for sports grounds and events have diverged significantly. So references to events in parks, etc., such as tram lines and maybe Base Fest, has now been taken out of this policy, and that will be the subject of a report later in the year for separate policy. It'll be devised for that one. Perhaps importantly, the council, as its statutory obligation for monitoring the sports stadium, were required to carry out during performance inspections. Previous policy set that number at 6 per season, for the two main stadia, Hillsborough and Bramall Lane. It's fair to say that both grounds have continued to comply with the standards set and have not really caused any issues with regards to those inspections. So we're looking to reduce the number of inspections per season or per annum, whichever way you want to look at it, to 4. Sports Ground Safety Authority recommend a minimum of 2, but anecdotal evidence says that we carry out more inspections than most other local authorities in any event. Has there been any consultation? All the SAG partners and the stadium operators have been consulted, as have the Sports Ground Safety Authority, and any comments that they provided us with have been reflected in this updated policy. Section 4, risk analysis, with your permission, Chair, I don't intend to read those out at length. It does detail the Council's responsibility towards the paying due regard to the public sector equality duty and other equalities issues. Said that at 4.1.6, I do make the comment, it is considered that this policy provides assurance and is fully consistent with our Equality Act duties. Financial and commercial implications, no financial implications. Legal implications, again, I don't intend to read those out. They are matters of primary legislation. They are there for the record. No climate implications and no other implications to note. Moving on to recommendations, following consultation with relevant partners, comments, suggestions and requests for amendments or additions have been considered and appropriately implemented into the proposed new document. And essentially what we're asking for you today is to approve the content of the revised safety certification, Safety Advisory Group policy attached at Appendix A.
Thank you. I've got Mark and then Christine.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for bringing the report. It's really, really important, not just to Sheffield, but to everybody. I remember as a child being bewildered, watching scenes unravel on the TV before it was cut, the Hillsborough incident. I remember the fire at Bradford, the Heysel Stadium, walls collapsing. I've been in football grounds when it has felt unsafe, so I really do welcome this, and I really appreciate all the hard work going into this. I also massively appreciate the element of including a supporters representative in this. It does feel far too often that the supporters are not involved in these conversations, and it's really important. And it's also extra important because sometimes the supporters are left having to fill a void due to a lack of information that can present itself as a narrative of the councils against us, the police is against us, whatever, and actually dealing with that will be really, really important. As someone born outside of Sheffield and with allegiances to a football club not here, I apologise, but it is just an artefact of birth, right, I guess. My first experiences of Sheffield were coming to Bramall Lane and coming to Sheffield Wednesday. So also we've recently seen complaints from Newcastle United about their anxiety about attending stadiums here in Sheffield, rightly or wrongly. I don't want to downplay it and I don't want to over-egg it either. But the only thing that I am thinking about the supporter representative is it doesn't necessarily capture those coming to the city. Certainly my first experience of Bramall Lane, having a police horse stand on my foot while being told to get towards the wall, wasn't necessarily a great one, and my anxiety going towards Hillsborough for the first time I came here was quite tangible. I still remember it. So I don't know how we can actually capture that. I think it is really important we have supporter representatives, but I'm not sure how we can capture that going forward to actually get those visiting the city. But I'm not sure whether you've got any thoughts or whether that's been in the plan so far.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Councillor. The Newcastle incident that you refer to, we investigated as a local authority, the certifying authority responsible for issuing the safety certificate, and we classified it as a near miss. The initial concerns were raised by a journalist photograph, and we actually reached out to Newcastle United supporters to gain their insight into exactly what their concerns were about being at that particular end of that particular stadium. It's fair to say that when we received responses from Newcastle United supporters, they raised different issues to the issues raised by the journalist. And we carried out a full investigation. We classed it as a near miss, and alterations have been made to the operation at that particular stadium as a result of that feedback. Going forward, we welcome any sort of contact from football supporters associations, any sort of local supporters associations for visiting teams, and we will fully investigate any complaints that we receive.
Thank you. Christy.
Thank you for your report. I know that this safety advisory group is looking at what happens in the stadium, but I'm also wondering how much you look at what happens outside the stadium. I am in Hillsborough, so obviously Sheffield Wednesday is in my constituency, and obviously a lot of roads are closed and there's an awful lot of illegal parking, which does cause potential safety incidents to residents. So is looking at how the traffic is managed part of what this group looks at? And if not, can it be?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. The area you refer to is technically known as Zone X. It's the area for which is outside the ground, and the club aren't legally responsible for any measures that they put in there. However, there is a moral responsibility, you're quite right. I'm aware that at Hillsborough, that the safety officer does have, he has set up a residents parking app, traffic app, to let residents know exactly what's happening in terms of road closures, the times that they can expect there to be disruption. I am a former resident of a road just off Leppings Lane, so I know exactly the pain that you feel, Councillor. Our Highways Department do sit on the Safety Advisory Group, and they do tell us about any traffic problems that they may be experiencing. Certainly in terms of parking, it's quite an emotive issue on match days, but certainly it has been raised in Safety Advisory Group meetings.
Thanks. Alexi.
Thank you. I just wanted to, and we previously did discuss this in the briefings, to raise the incident of racism at Sheffield Wednesday, and whether there was any enforcement action taken by the council in relation to that, and if this comes within the scope of this policy.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. The recent incident at Hillsborough is currently being investigated by South Yorkshire Police. I understand the individual is subject to criminal actions at the moment. But in terms of this policy and the safety certification group, it sits slightly outside that. I say slightly outside because the club is required to prepare a matchday operations manual. Now, part of that matchday operations manual is a crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour plan, where they will detail how they will deal with incidents such as the one we speak of. They will also be required to sign a statement of intent with South Yorkshire Police as to how and when they will get South Yorkshire Police involved. Now that document is reviewed every year as part of our review of the safety certification, and South Yorkshire Police pass comment on that crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour plan. No adverse comments received last year. We are currently in the midst of reviewing the safety certificate for this year. So I fully assume that South Yorkshire Police will address the issues that we speak about here in this year's review.
Thank you. So, I mean, in answer to Alexi's question, you said slightly outside that I'm sorry, I've seen another hand now. I'll come to you in a second, Mark. Mike, I'll come to you in a second. Although it's slightly outside, the club's commitment to deal with incidents of that kind is in a document that is reviewed by us as part of this policy. Is what you're saying. So I suppose the question is, do you believe that their policy in that document is sufficient and adequate?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. The whole point of the Safety Advisory Group is that it encompasses various experts in their particular field. South Yorkshire Police being the experts in crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour. They reviewed the documents last summer before we reissued the safe certificate, and they are currently reviewing the documents again. I've not received any adverse comments from South Yorkshire Police to say that they don't consider the antisocial behaviour plan to be unworkable.
Okay, thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for this comprehensive and basically positive report. I do have a question about the number of in dropping the inspections from 6 to 4. Are some of those 4 inspections done when the matches are held during the night time, or are they all on daytime matches? And then let's pick up on something else.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. A whole mix. Night matches, Sunday matches, Saturday matches, the whole mix. I think at this point it's probably important to point out that that is a minimum number. If we highlight any issues and feel a revisit is necessary, then we will increase those numbers. We will visit as much as is necessary to each stadium.
Thank you for that. And like Christine mentioned, although Southey Ward is outside, doesn't have the Hillsborough ground, we do get a lot of match day parking, particularly on Herries Road going up into the Scraithwood estate and roads off, and also Foxhill Road and roads off of there. So would it be possible to feed into the Safety Advisory Group? Does it meet on Teams, or do you have face-to-face meetings?
We meet face-to-face. Next Sheffield Wednesday meeting is this Friday morning, and I'll certainly add it to the agenda.
Thank you. I've not seen other hands. I would like to just test a little bit further this proposal to reduce the minimum number of inspections. I mean, can you just explain to me? I suppose the question in my mind is, what is likely to change from one inspection to the next that might merit that inspection? I mean, presumably, if there was a physical change to the layout of a thing, that would be inspected as it was, before it opened. But other than that, what are the kinds of changes that merit a certain rate of inspections that might happen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As a local authority, we will attend and make sure that the stadium is complying with the terms and conditions of the safe certificate that we issue. Such conditions on that might be a minimum number of first aiders, minimum number of stewards in prescribed positions. If I attend at Bramall Lane at the next game and find out that they are 25 stewards short or 5 first aiders short, I will want to attend the next fixture to make sure that they've addressed that after I've addressed the issue with the club on the day. Okay, no, I appreciate that. Okay, so if there are any other further questions or comments on this? Oh, sorry, Alexa, yes, go on.
It's just a comment in like regards to our previous discussion about this is a review of a policy that happens every year. That's right, it's annual review. For a future policy review to consider whether that racism needs to be more explicitly talked about in this document, because I'm sure everyone will agree that people will not feel safe or indeed be safe going to a ground to watch a match if they are, or players are subjected to racist abuse. So it does need to be, in my view, more explicitly in the policy going forward.
Sorry, Alexei, are you asking for that to be in the match day handbook that the clubs produce, that is reviewed as part of this policy? Is that what you're asking for? Or because it's not like I say, it's somewhat outside this policy as it was described. I'm just really clear what you're asking for.
I think explicit explicitly addressing racism in the policy and the approach to it of the council and any enforcement actions.
In this safety at sports ground policy? Right, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. It is the club's legal responsibility to deal with issues on its own footprint. If an incident occurs, let's not beat about the bush, let's say it's a racist incident, and it starts to cause public order issues for safety in the ground, then that's where we'll start to look at it. If it's a single criminal action of a single person, and that doesn't necessarily impinge on public safety, but I do accept that people might not feel necessarily comfortable around that. Sheffield Wednesday are really proactive. They do have a text reporting line, so if the supporter in front of you is uttering profanities or homophobic or racist, using homophobic or racist terms, that can be reported directly to the safety officer, and they will then be removed, provided people can identify who that person is. So the clubs are proactive in all this.
Is that a sufficient answer to you, Alexia? I'm slightly difficulty in. I don't think we can revise this policy in front of us. I think we have to agree it. I think I'm not sure legally where we would stand in terms of adding the thing you're asking to this policy, because it is under a piece of legislation about safety at sports grounds. But it might be possible. I don't know. I think you might have to ask for a piece of work to be done, which I don't know. I mean, you know. But otherwise, I mean, unless you want to come up with a specific proposal, I think we just have to agree this policy. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. All right. Can we agree the recommendations in this report? I'll take silence as agreement. Yep. Thank you. That is agreed. Okay. Item 11, the Waste and Street Scene Committee Climate Statement. Page 79. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of the report is to respond to the annual climate progress report issued in 2022-23 in a timely manner, restate the cross-party council commitment to taking what action we can to address the climate emergency and adapting our city and council for a changing climate, and reduce emissions to achieve our ambition set out net zero city and council by 2030. To increase understanding of the impact climate change will have on various committees and the opportunities that tackling climate change offers, and the contribution to climate and net zero action each committee is currently making and needs to make going forward. So the recommendations in summary are, on the back of the decision taken by Strategy and Resources Policy Committee at its meeting held on the 13th of December 2023, the committee is recommended to consider, and if not previously agree their respective statements to ensure that the proposed actions in the work plan containing such statement are reflected in their ongoing work plan going forward. As you'll recall, councillors, we've done a number of sessions on this via the knowledge briefing sessions, and we've incorporated that initial feedback into this plan as well. And the intention is, as the Chair's already mentioned, we've got a session with officers and members later this month to set our portfolio operational plan together, so that for the next 12 months, and we intend to unpick this and put some of these actions into that plan going forward so we can start to deliver some of these items. So a summary, the climate emergency is one of the biggest challenges we face as a city, a region, a country and global community. It's acknowledged that achieving net zero by 2030 is going to be extremely challenging. The publication of the annual climate progress report has highlighted the scale of the challenge in the public domain. The report shows while action is being taken and progress is being made in some areas of work, we have not reduced emissions at the pace or scale required to meet our 2030 target. It's clear to achieve this target and to stay within the city's carbon budget, urgent action is needed at a scale not seen before. And maintaining an ambitious target is important in funding discussions and to enable robust policy frameworks to be developed. The statements set out in this report share our commitment to addressing climate change and how climate change relates to our communities and how it relates to each of our specific policy committees. How climate change relates to our committees reiterates the constitutional requirement for all committees to consider climate and outline of the specific committees for which further content has been developed within the plan. Climate change relates to each of our specific policy committees and contains a specific statement from Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee. These statements set out the following against committee's remit. So related or relevant city sector council emissions, impacts of climate change and benefits of acting, how the committee can contribute and support climate action through decision making, and key decisions on the current committee work plan and council service plans that strongly support climate net zero targets. Consultation-wise, Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee climate statement is for information only and does not explicitly require consultation. Equality implications. An initial assessment has been undertaken on the climate statements. As decisions are made on specific decisions, full equality impact assessments will be prepared where appropriate for individual decision and actions and was not required on the composite of committee climate statements. On financial and commercial implications, there are no financial and commercial implications arising directly from this report. However, there will be financial implications of net zero by 2030 and climate change, and obviously if we do implement the actions outlined in the Waste and Street Scene Action Plan. Legal implications, there are no legal implications arising out of this report directly. On climate implications, the statements in themselves do not increase, maintain or reduce greenhouse gas emissions against any of the categories. However, they restate our climate commitments amidst a challenging time, commit to developing council-wide service climate adaptation plans and include an overview of the commitment of the decisions and that committees intend to take to support and accelerate net zero and climate action at pace and scale as what is needed. If you go to the actual committee, the climate statement itself, that gives an overview of current emissions and the standards and progress where we are corporately. And then there's an introduction into the role of Waste and Street Scene and the work we've already done over the last 2 or 3 years. You can see there how Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee are committed to, and we've agreed this by the knowledge briefings previously and previous service plans, but we are intending to work with other policy committees on surface water flooding, remediation and wider flood strategy work, engage with Yorkshire Water to ensure their business plan for maintaining and managing their assets, infrastructure and sewers are robust and fit for future weather events. Members will recall Yorkshire Water came to committee in December and have agreed to come back on a regular basis to update members on that progress. Ensure the future waste strategy for the city maximises decarbonisation and circular economy opportunities. Continue to maximise opportunities for heat decarbonisation by promoting the district energy network and supporting expansion opportunities. Work with the Street Tree Partnership to enable carbon sequestration opportunities whilst also recognising the climate adaptation contributions street trees make. Improving local environmental quality through our regulation and licensing function. Give consideration of every opportunity for investing in renewable energy projects on council land and buildings within the Waste and Street Scene portfolio to generate energy and income. Influence the development of our green travel plan for all our staff and partners to include grey fleet, staff parking and active travel. And continue to identify the regulatory levers, powers that we can employ now and in future to reduce carbon emissions. And the following section, I highlight some of the specifics, key action of the work plan, which as mentioned will be taken at the member session later this month and will feed into our operational service plan for 24-25. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Sue.
Thank you very much. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with the importance of this. I just have some questions about these proposed actions. Principally because with a few exceptions, there's no timescale. And also, although it says on work plan, they don't all directly relate to items that are on our work plan. And I think somehow or other they need to be brought together. So I really do think that a lot of these proposals, none of which I would actually disagree with, I think, need to be incorporated quite urgently into the items we've already got on our work plan or brought as a separate item so that we can actually move them forward. Because there is a tendency, isn't there, without timescales or without them being committed to, that they just drift as good ideas that never happen. So I would just like to know how we're actually going to progress these as soon as.
Thank you, Councillor. So some of those items on the work plan are already in play. So the Street Tree Partnership, you'll be aware, the Western Street Scene Committee are fully engaged in that strategy, and we've refreshed that strategy. But you're absolutely right. So we need some definitive dates and commitment to these. So this will form part of the session we've got with members later this month on the detail, and then the intention is these will go into our operational service plan, and within that we'll have specific dates and leads for those, and then we'll share that operational service plan with Western Street Scene Committee. So it will be in the next month or so, it will have definitive dates against all these actions.
So is that likely to be in place, say, for the first meeting of the new committee next year? Thank you, that is good news. Thank you.
So the service plan obviously feeds into PDRs, personal PDRs. So we need to get the service plan in the next month or so ready in its draft form so we can start to share with staff. So the intention is sort of May time, that'll be fully signed off and then in preparation to be brought to June Western Street Scene Committee.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm just going to make a few comments and maybe a question. I mean, I'm massively frustrated by this whole process, I've got to say. I mean, I appreciate that we're not the Transport, Regeneration and Climate Committee and that they have given us this kind of structure to work within. They've asked each committee to produce a statement like this, full of kind of ideas of things we can do. And so that's what we've done. I'm not, I don't get from this a sense of the big picture in terms of the things that happen within Western Street Scene, including the entire waste service, which is obviously going to have a huge carbon footprint, the entire road maintenance service, which is going to have a huge carbon footprint, and then all the other bits and pieces that also have significant impacts. And then, how to get each of those to net zero. I mean, that's an absolutely massive challenge, and I'm not sure that the ideas in here are come to us in that context. I'm not clear what difference. I mean, we've got a proposal here for more water fountains across the public realm, which is a great policy. There should be more water fountains, clearly. It's not clear to me that will make any difference to carbon impact. It might cause more carbon than it saves. I mean, maybe it doesn't. We'll have to do our homework on that. But it feels like we're scratching around for little things and not being frank about where the heavy lifting is and how much it would cost. And if we're not going to do it because we haven't got the money, which we haven't, then that's why we're not doing it. So that would be my approach to a climate statement for net zero. Although obviously we've got this proposal in front of us, the ideas in it are I'm not sure about the water bottle one, the fountain one, but the ideas are broadly good ideas. So I'm happy to agree it. But my goodness, if this is how we're going to get to net zero, we're not going to get to net zero, are we? Frankly. Sorry, that was a comment and a bit of a rant. I don't know if you want to come back on that, Richard, or you can just agree. That would be fine.
I know we've discussed this previously, Chair. I would draw members' attention to the annual report. There is some references in there around the biggest areas. So to backing up what the Chair said, you can see waste management is one of the biggest areas. It is coming down, but it's not coming down at the right pace. I think we're all agreed on that. You can also see around the Streets Ahead contract, street lighting is probably our biggest use of energy. Again, a 32% reduction from the baseline in 2019, but it needs to come down faster. So there needs to be more levers we need to pull to get, if we are going to get to 2030, and we are aware of that.
All right, Richard, I mean, I'll see Alexia, I'll bring in a second. To say the street lighting needs to come down faster, unless you've got even more efficient lights than LEDs, the only way it comes down is that we darken the streets. And the proposal we had that we agreed in principle to bring forward a year ago is now stalled because advice is that we'd be in legally in dangerous water if we did that. So it's all very well saying it needs to come down faster. It's not going down any further from where it is, as far as I can see, because we need to keep the streets lit. And that means, well, that means a higher burden on everything else to achieve net zero, to achieve net negative, in order to make up for the fact that we're still going to have street lighting. You know, I don't see the value of not being frank about that and saying, well, it needs to come down faster. Well, you know, there are plenty of technologies out there to replace most of the things we do that emit carbon emissions, but I'm not aware that you know, we can replace lighting with kind of free energy for lighting. What we can do is rely on the national policy to convert the electricity grid to renewables and nuclear, and then we can light the streets as much as we want, can't we? I mean, that would be what I would say in a statement like this. Sorry, you've got me ranting now. I apologise. It's not you. It's not you. Hands have gone up now. Alexia and then Christine.
Thank you. Yeah, I welcome the report, and I think there are things in here that are ambitious and will lead to carbon savings if we can implement them all. But I think we also need to recognise that we're constrained by the two big contracts in our committee, the Streets Ahead contract and the Veolia contract, which does put limits on how we can either our waste strategy is constrained by that contract, and also the Streets Ahead contract is, you know, we replace things on a like-for-like basis, for example. I think there's like some elephants in the room, and it's not for our committee, it's more for transport again. But the ARIC report said we need to have a 66% reduction in car use. That's not going to happen, is it? Based on the policies that are coming from the Transport Committee. And if we did have a 66% in reduction in car use, I imagine that there'd be far less wear and tear on the roads. Like the Streets Ahead wouldn't have to do so much repairing roads and repairing potholes and pavements as well when cars had parked on them and they weren't designed for that, things like that. So I think, yeah, there are some elephants in the room there, but overall, I think in terms of our committee, we have to do everything in our power that we can at the moment, and not wait for others to do the right thing, but to lead by example.
Christine.
Yep, I welcome the report, and I think most of my comments have been said. I think, Joe, water fountains reduce the need for plastic water bottles. That reduces carbon footprint, doesn't it? Yeah. You don't have to make plastic then, do you? Anyway, yeah, I was just going to say, you did raise it, that we do need electricity and we'll always need electricity, and we have to be realistic about that, but we can look at how we can generate more ourselves, and I'm glad that that's in this document, renewable energy projects, explore opportunities to install solar panels, and yeah, I mean, we've just got to look at it, haven't we, and see what we can do. So that's all I really want to say.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Yes, we've been arguing for many, many years that climate change and tackling climate change should be a golden thread through all our policies. And I feel that we are moving in the right direction to ensure that that's recognised and actually implemented. Yeah, I don't really want to go off on tangents in terms of stuff that we could be doing. But I guess going forward, if we had a wish list that I had, it would be, do we still feel that solar canopies in car parking spaces are a hindrance, or are they an actual benefit? Mindful that others would say that solar canopies are often used in more Mediterranean climates because they protect the cars from the heat of the sun, rather than actually being a generating opportunity. And I know there's pitfalls and gains from both of them. So is that something we could be looking to put spending our revenue from parking on, improving, uplifting those facilities? But the other thing about surface water flooding that I've often wondered about is we've got a magnificent programme of Greater Green on our roads to try and capture some of that surface water flooding. We haven't really got a Greater Green equivalent within our car parking spaces, and they are large tarmacked areas that are non-permeable to water and will be adding to flooding. But again, we've got Amey on the contract on the thing later. We've always asked Amey, or at least I have, what are they going to do about going forward with the increased amount of water that's hitting our roads? This last month, we know that there have been great strides taken forward in fixing potholes, but every time there's a heavy downpour, I notice more and more accumulations of gravels on the side of our road and in the gullies. So actually, even that increased rainfall, not just extra cars, seems to be degrading our road surface at a more rapid rate. So what are they going to do about, one, capturing that water? What are our conversations with Amey about capturing that water? And actually, how are we going to look to mitigate the increased waterfall, 30% over the next 10 years that we're anticipating? And all those bits. They're difficult questions, but assuming that they are part of the conversations and the part of the thinking that we've got going forward, then that is good. It's just how we're going to actually start doing some of that. I guess it is putting flesh on it and time to when we're going to start delivering things as well. So, but otherwise, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, there is an item on surface water flooding and flood water mitigation. I mean, heaviness of rainfall, I guess, could come to that. I'm keen that we don't talk in too much detail on this. Really, I think we do need to agree and move on. Yeah, if there's anything you want to say on that, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. On the infrastructure for EV vehicles, that's on the list. It does need some more meat onto that because it does talk about increasing the network across our car parks. And I know we've talked about, is there an opportunity around solar canopies? That's in the mix. That's a piece of work we're on with at the moment. Your point around the two big contracts and our partners, Amey and Veolia, they'll have their own climate statement and they will be feeding into this. So absolutely, any ideas, any best practice we've got around sort of transport and waste, we'll be feeding that into both those partners to make sure they reflect that.
I must say, on the car parks, I'm not clear what installation of electric chargers in car parks is us, what is TRC and what is the MCA. And I think possibly, you know, we come under all three categories. But let's not try and solve that today. I've got Tim, and then I'd like to move to a decision.
No, I agree. We need the Greater Green on car parks, particularly because that is something that we need to do. And I have seen, in the past, some work on one or two councils where it's not just been a tarmac surface; it's been a much more of a sort of a grid that allows the water to flow away. If the council had it, but that's too much detail for today. What I'd like to see is that. The likely incoming government has talked about booting to the back end of the next Parliament some of their, Green New Deal projects or whatever they call it. But one of the things that we need to have as a council is to make sure that we've got some oven ready, as the phrase goes, projects that we can take advantage of it as soon as the money becomes available. So when we're talking about some of these things about explore opportunities on various things like the solar panels and car parks, that sort of thing, is to make sure we've got a worked up business case and some real plans that we can just take off and say, look, we've got them here, come on, give us the money. Or we've been talking to you, you said you want to spend money, we can spend it, we can move fast. And that's what we just need to do. I know there's officer time constraints and that sort of thing, but we do need to make sure that a lot of the stuff we're talking about is that we've got the plans are not just sort of amorphous plans, but they are actually, we've got plans that we can have ready to implement and then make sure that we can move fast and take advantage of the money, because that's something that Sheffield has struggled with in the past, is to have things that they can show to government. And governments of any who, if you can say we've got this and we're ready to spend it and we've got a fully development plan, but we haven't got the money, if you give us the money, we can implement it and you can wheel out your minister to come and whatever later on. They're always going to be in for that, and that's what we need to make sure that we do in order to make sure that Sheffield is at the front of the game.
Thanks, Tim. Quite agree. I guess that was a comment, wasn't it? But I guess the ask is that we do have projects that are oven ready. Is oven ready a phrase we can use? Worked up, because you know, pots of money do appear for these things, don't they? And if you're ready with a project and you say this is how much carbon it's going to save, you know, then yes, Alexei.
Yeah, I think what Tim's talking about is a corporate opportunities register that we already adopted at full council after a green motion. So that should be already happening, but maybe we need to check that it actually is with officers.
Well done, Alexei. Good. Right, okay. Can we agree the recommendations in this report? That's the adoption.
Yes, Chair.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Okay. Item 12 is, thank you, Richard. Item 12 is the civil parking, bus lane and moving traffic enforcement policy. It was a late paper, so it's in a supplementary agenda pack. Yes, if you'd like to come and present. If you would introduce yourselves and then introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sabia Hanif, Parking Services Manager. I'm here to support Emma. She'll introduce herself and present the report.
Hi, hello. I'm Emma Barker. I'm Policy and Improvement Officer for Parking Services. As Sabia has mentioned, I'm here to present the Civil Parking, Bus Lane and Moving Traffic Enforcement Policy report, and thank you for your time today listening to this. So the report is intended to update the parking and bus lane policy, which went through September last year, which was updating the policies on those specific bits of enforcement that we already do. The updated policy is to include within that moving traffic enforcement, which is planned to be introduced. There's been work already done by my colleagues in transport, and items approved by the TRC already. The aim of the policy and implementation of moving traffic enforcement is to support transport strategy, targets and objectives, and help meet requirements of the Traffic Management Act 2004. So things like helping reduce congestion, improving road safety, improvements to the environment, improving compliance and sustainable objectives, helping public transport, helping cyclists, helping pedestrians. So the policy provides updated information and guidance on the national regulations, government guidance, the appeals process that motorists can follow to dispute moving traffic PCNs, as well as bus lanes and parking PCNs, and they all sit under the same umbrella regulations, hence why we've incorporated it all in the same bit of policy, because it's all governed, as I say, by the same regulations for us to issue the tickets and consider appeals. The amended version is aimed at ensuring that the policy includes new enforcement powers, reflects national regulations and guidance, and remains transparent and consistent in what we're doing with enforcement. So the report recommendations seeks approvals of updates to the policy to include these moving traffic enforcement powers. There is also a recommendation for minor amendments in the table within the document for the moving traffic restrictions contained in Appendix A of the policy to be delegated to Executive Director for, as an officer decision. The current policy lists certain moving traffic contraventions, including band turns and box junctions, but there are further moving traffic contraventions that we can in the future issue PCNs for. The reason they've not been included at this stage in the policy is because my colleagues in traffic regulations and transport are still collating information on the other traffic regulation orders that cover those different restrictions, so that we can have information about what all the exemptions are in those. There is potential that there could be new traffic regulation orders introduced for some of the restrictions, and again, they would contain the exemptions for those particular types of restrictions, which would then seek to mirror into the policy, so that it's got the full list of the different contraventions and the different exemptions that apply to different types of restrictions. So, like I say, at the moment there's still ongoing work being done on that, which is why all those other restrictions aren't yet included in the policy, but it's our intention to incorporate those. All the traffic regulation orders that have already been made and all those that will be made will go through a legal process and consultation process to create them, so there will be a proper due process to make sure that those are set up correctly. As I say, the exemptions that will go in the policy will just be mirroring what is from those traffic regulation orders. The decision to implement moving traffic enforcement in Sheffield has already been taken. That went to TRC. The powers have been given to Sheffield by the Department for Transport. There's a designation order that was approved in June 2023, and that gives Sheffield the power to issue penalty charge notices to vehicles contravening these restrictions, and that would be using ANPR cameras for such enforcement. Within the report document, there's a link to the Enforcing Moving Traffic Offences report, and that has identified 3 initial sites where it's intended to implement cameras for moving traffic enforcement, those being Queen's Road, Bramall Lane, Glossop Road, Upper Hanover Street and Hoyle Street. All 3 of those locations have got yellow box junctions, and the first 2 sites have also got illegal turns, which is intended to enforce using moving traffic enforcement powers. Currently, colleagues in transport are working on the full business case to move ahead with implementing those restrictions. So the traffic enforcement policy document here lists a summary of changes to the policy, but some of the key ones to note is obviously references within the document to moving traffic enforcement, including reasons for this enforcement. That's contained in section 3, page 18 in the documents. The introduction of a warning notice period for moving traffic enforcement has been added, page 39. So unlike the other warning notice periods that we've got for bus lanes and for parking restrictions, this is actually contained within statutory guidance issued by the Department for Transport, which we've got due guard as a local authority to follow. And the statutory guidance sets out a period of 6 months following the implementation of moving traffic camera enforcement at each new site. And during that period, we'd issue, for the first contravention picked up by an individual notice, we'd issue a warning notice with some educational information in that for them. If they then, within that 6-month period, enter the restriction again, they would get a penalty charge notice, so it wouldn't be a blanket 6 months. Every single contravention gets a warning notice. It would be for first-time offenders within that 6-month period. Within the document, I've also mentioned the enforcement priorities, including moving traffic priorities. Appendix B has been amended, so Appendix B covers persistent evaders. So at the moment we currently remove vehicles that are regarded as persistent evaders who've got 3 or more unpaid parking penalty charge notices which haven't been appealed, haven't been paid, and essentially the motorist is ignoring them, whether that be because they've got the vehicle registered at an incorrect address, or whether that be because they're chancing the lock on that they won't kind of get caught up with. So the aforementioned statutory guidance covering moving traffic enforcement and bus lanes does include that we can now cover offenders for bus lane and moving traffic offences in the classification of persistent evaders. So that opens us the options to cover a wider group of motorists who are potentially ignoring fines that are being sent to them. There's also amendments within the CEO handbook, obviously as I mentioned before, to include box junctions, banned turn restrictions. There's also, in addition to that, there's a change to incorporate bus gates under moving traffic enforcement. So instead of issuing penalty charge notices for being in a bus lane when someone's entered a bus gate, which we are allowed to do under the current legal regulations, the PCM would be for using a route restricted to certain vehicles, which we feel is a clearer explanation to the motorists that using a bus gate of the reason why the ticket is issued. And in addition to that, the statutory guidance which has been published for moving traffic enforcement lists contraventions, signs and contraventions that moving traffic enforcement can and should be used for, which includes bus gates within moving traffic. So the other changes within the policy is to do with the appeals side of PCNs. So within the Appendix C, the guidance policies for civil parking and bus lane appeals and traffic moving traffic enforcement, there's been a section some items added which cover some of the potential reasons why motorists might challenge moving traffic offences. The reasons for appeal have been discussed with some of the local authorities who already carry out moving traffic enforcement. Many of them have mentioned that it's similar reasons why we get challenges to bus lanes, bus gates, for example, such as people not seeing the signs, following sat-nav. But as I say, there are some additional reasons that have been incorporated in the policy to cover some things that might come up that are more specific to moving traffic offences. So, yeah, in summary, there's legal and climate implications that have been considered, as I've mentioned before, the network management duties, the expeditious movement of traffic, also emissions reduction and improving public transport efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this, for bringing this report to us. Obviously, as you said, TRC have already made a decision that to press ahead with enforcement of moving traffic offences, and they've chosen some locations where it should happen, which are Queen's Road, Bramall Lane, Glossop Road, Hanover Street and Hoyle Street. And this is just the policy under which that enforcement will happen that we're here to consider. Can you just clarify for me, in terms of the recommendations, the delegation to the Executive Director to make minor amendments to the table in Appendix A. Appendix A is 95 pages long and has lots of tables in it. Can you just clarify for me specifically which table we're talking about, what page it's on? If that takes you a moment, I'll go to members for comments.
Sorry, I'm just going through the documents for a minute.
I'm not actually seeing any hands either. I might, unless somebody put one up earlier. Alexi, you come in. Come in. Sorry, Alexa, did you want to speak there? Or are we waiting? I don't know if we've, yes, no, maybe we should wait for the answer.
If it helps Emma at all, the moving traffic restrictions section of the report, of the appendix, seems to start on page 139. I'm wondering if it's the table on 140.
Yeah, sorry, I just got to that, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, it's the table on page 140. So at the moment that shows the contravention codes starting from box junctions, and then it moves onto the next page for the finishing on the contravention code for performing a prohibited turn.
Right. Okay. So this is only those basically 4 categories that we're agreeing to the stage, but there could be others added as a result of. But it says as a result of TRO. So I'm slightly baffled by that. A TRO determines what is allowed and what isn't, whereas this is just an enforcement policy. It's not affected, is it, by what is or isn't allowed?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So the traffic regulation order would set up where a restriction is in place and essentially what the rules are for that restriction, which would include any exemptions. There are other, as I say, for example, other moving traffic offences that we can could in future incorporate as examples, pedestrian zones, school streets, and they may well have unique different exemptions contained within them that differ, for example, for box junctions or band turns. So what we'd seek to do is incorporate the relevant contravention code, which is set nationally, the description of that code, examples of the signage. So, for example, for a pedestrian zone, the pedestrian zone signs, what the traffic regulation order exemptions are for that pedestrian zone, and any other information into this table.
Yes, okay, I think I understand that. Alexa, do you want to come in now?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the report. I think it's really welcome that we're going to be now enforcing moving traffic offences. I think maybe we need to update your titles, because maybe it should be parking services and road regulation enforcement as well. Because there's a lot more going into your areas of work now with enforcing these regulations as well as the CAS. I'm sure everyone is aware in this committee, because I've spoken about it lots of times, that Sheffield does have particularly dangerous roads, especially for children, with a 40% higher KSI rate. That's 40% more children killed or seriously injured on Sheffield's roads than the nearest core city, and that is something that this measure will help us to tackle. But obviously we need to do that. We need to take more measures as well, including we'd welcome powers from the government to enforce things like pavement parking and parking in places that is obstructive, but we currently can't enforce. I have to say as well that this particularly welcome from a personal point of view, because I'm a cyclist, and I can say that many times I've been overtaken by vehicles in those box junctions, for example, or on Queen's Road, or cars coming down the wrong lane, or overtaking the bus lane where there's no space to do so. So for some of these locations, we might be able to enforce some of that, but I think we need to hopefully be able to roll this out further as well in other locations that aren't currently being considered. But anything that will make our roads safer will be welcome. And coming back to the climate implications, I think also one of the reasons that people at the moment choose not to walk, cycle or wheel to their workplace or to take their children to school by those forms of transport is because of how unsafe the roads are. So, you know, the safer it is, the more people will be empowered to take that decision. I just wanted to ask a question on the persistent evaders section. We've previously discussed in the pre-meetings and briefings that it's not a policy to clamp evaders if they're parked in an obstructed place. That makes sense. But is there powers to clamp if you see a persistent evader parked somewhere else? Can we clamp them at that time to stop them from being moved away their car? Because it sometimes takes time for you to say, okay, there's a persistent evader here, we're going to remove this vehicle, but when the vehicle comes to remove that vehicle, they've moved on.
Yes, thank you for your question. So when we enforce when it's persistent evaders, they have to be parked in contravention of a restriction, which obviously requires the CEO issuing a PCN and then contacting the removal company to come out to remove that vehicle. We do aim to get to the removal truck there within an hour. There are occasions when it is quicker than that. For clamping of vehicles, it leaves the vehicle still in situ where it's causing obstruction or a problem for the road users rather than removing the problem. And we'd have a similar sort of issue where we don't currently have a contract for anyone to clamp, but we'd have to get a clamping company to come out to clamp the vehicle. So we'd still have that time between the PCN being issued and that action being taken. Generally, in terms of statutory guidance from government, there is a sort of steering away from clamping and more towards removals.
Just a bit confused then how the persistent evaders policy relates to the moving traffic, or is it, because you said that you'd be able to enforce against persistent evaders of a moving traffic offence?
Thank you. So what we currently experience is we have our enforcement team contact us regarding a vehicle they think may be a persistent evader. It triggers on the handhelds that they've got a certain number of open tickets, but when they contact the team to check whether or not they can remove it, in many cases it may be that they've only got 1 or 2 parking tickets, but the rest are bus lane tickets. So at the moment we can't remove them because they don't tick the right criteria for the number of parking tickets. But with the bus lane offences coming into the policy, we would then be able to remove those vehicles because they've got over the number of tickets in terms of both bus lane and parking.
Thanks, Tim.
Just first as a comment, great on Glossop Road, Upper Hanover Street last night, and I see it all the time, every time I walk into council, turning there, putting that in is going to help because so many people know that they can turn right, and basically people are watching their next set of traffic lights up and cross, school traffic, that sort of thing, what Alexi's been saying, university students, me, nearly getting run over the whole time by cars that are legally turning right. But, yeah, I know. I know. But the thing I want to ask is, in your regulations, you talk about, it seems to be quite onerous, if somebody drives off, the amount of paperwork that has to be committed. Do you keep figures on the number of drivers who drive off that you then don't subsequently take action against, or do you have it tabulated? Because in the regulations in here, you know, there's quite a lot of paperwork to be done by the traffic enforcement officers about this. Do you keep figures on which ones you then move on to prosecute and those which you're actually able to that you don't persist with because they've driven off and the traffic officer hasn't done enough paperwork to merit taking any further action, even though that person who's driven off was quite obviously contravening any of the traffic orders that we've got listed here.
Thank you for your question. So just for clarity, the vehicles driving off, it's the parking contraventions that you're referring to?
In one part of the regulation, I've got to find it now, it talks about that, if a vehicle drives off before we've had the ability to either affix a ticket to the screen or whatever, there's quite a number of steps that the traffic enforcement officer has to go through in order to then pursue or to log a potential contravention that would then result in an issuing of a fine. Do you have figures on when you don't decide to proceed because the paperwork hasn't quite been done, or they don't think you've got enough? Do you tabulate that at all? Do you keep figures on that?
It's thank you for that. It's not something that we currently run reports on. So there are some circumstances where a civil enforcement officer has completed the ticket and has got to the point where it's printing off the handheld, and the driver then returns and either refuses to accept the ticket from the officer or they drive off. And in those circumstances, as long as the printing has been started, we can then issue the ticket by post. So we'd have records of how many of those tickets have been issued in that way. But if it's that the officer hasn't completed enough information on the handheld to get to the point of printing it, then they can't proceed and we can't issue the PCM by post. That I'm aware of, we haven't got statistics on that. I'd have to look if we can pull anything on that. But part of the guidance the British Parking Association came out, shared with local authorities on cases like that, is also about educating motorists. So if an officer has partly completed the ticket, the motorist comes back, is to explain to the driver that they haven't got a ticket on this occasion, explain what they have done wrong so that they know for future, to try and improve that compliance that way.
Thanks. I've got another couple of hands, so I'd like to move to a decision. I hope that was all right, Tim. I don't want us to get into too much of how does the service work, if we can help it, if it's not relevant to the decision that we've got to make. Sorry, I've got Mark. Was there another hand after Mark? No, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you for this. It's a really complex area, and there are lots of legislative parts to pull together. And I appreciate how difficult it all is and bewildering for us members, let alone you've got to deal with it on a daily basis. The exemptions here, I just wanted to confirm something with regards to 31 on page 1440. This is something that's caused me anxiety, and we often see it in some of the more meaningless press agencies that are out there. So when emergency vehicles are coming down the road and you're stuck at a traffic light or there's a bus lane next to you, people are not moved to get out the way at the moment. But what I think I read our interpretation here for an exemption is, if you enter a box junction to allow an emergency vehicle to get through, you can appeal against any ticket you would get. So actually, when drivers do the right thing to get out the way for blue light services and such like, we won't be giving out tickets to drivers. Am I reading that right from this?
Thank you for your question. So the exemption referenced against Code 31 is vehicles that are permitted. So it's the blue light vehicles that are permitted in the box junction, rather than someone avoiding a blue light, like trying to get out of the way of a blue light vehicle. In terms of people doing that, the contraventions when a vehicle is captured in a box junction would be reviewed by officers before a ticket is issued to check for any sort of just reason why a vehicle might have had to enter the box junction, had to stop in the box junction. So there would be that reviewing of individual cases before we issue penalty charge notices, and also again an appeals process if someone feels that we've unreasonably issued a ticket to them when there was mitigating circumstances.
Okay, so we still do retain the ability to actually say now they were doing the right thing for the right reason. At the
I
right
think,
time.
Mark,
Yeah.
my understanding of the rules are that you shouldn't break any rules in order to make way for an emergency vehicle. So you shouldn't be driving bus lanes, you shouldn't be going through red lights. I'm not sure it's wise for us in this forum to unpick that. If there's more accurate guidance, you know, don't take it from me. But you know, I think you've had an answer in terms of what the exemption committee means. And I think there are good reasons for saying don't break the rules, don't drive in bus lanes. The emergency vehicle can always use the bus lane if it wants the drivers in front of it to behave in a predictable way. I think that's what they need to help them get through. So there are good reasons for that. So I know people want to be helpful, but it's not always it doesn't always work out for the best. Are we? I've not seen any more hands. I'd like to move a decision on this. I'll just comment. Again, thank you for this. I mean, Alexei, you expressed an ambition to have lots more of this enforcement. Obviously, you need to lobby a TRC member, perhaps the one next to you, to get more places added to the list. I will say that clearly the locations that have been chosen are there because they represent a large-scale, persistent problem that has an impact on our transport objectives. That's the environment, it's congestion, it's road safety. And that's quite right that we should do that. And I'm sure further locations that come forward will also be locations with persistent problems that are proportionate to the amount of work and the amount of resources we're putting into this in order to achieve a better transport network for the city. So in that spirit, can we agree the recommendations? I'll take that silence. That is agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, final item is item 13, the Amey Streets Ahead contract performance. Can I have the officers come to us? I will repeat that obviously the appendices contain closed information, so I'll ask after the officers presented if any members want to speak on to any of those closed items.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Councillors. I'm Hamid Edrous, Assistant Director for Highways Maintenance at Sheffield City Council. And I'm accompanied by my two officers. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm David Wayne, was responsible for the maintenance functions of the Amey contract. And Davin Lowe, also a similar role to David.
You'd like to present the report?
Yeah, so just this report is just a follow-up on the report that was published in September, in advance of the hearings in September 2023. I'll touch upon some of the items in the main report before I just note that we're going to go into the appendix. So one of the key items that was outlined in the main report itself was the need for the council to focus on strengthening its monitoring, monitoring and improving its monitoring and auditing capabilities in-house, overseeing the Streets Ahead contract. So just an update on that. The council has now appointed an assistant director, and that's myself. We've also filled in 2 service manager posts. We've appointed 2 service managers to support the assistant director, and also a technical officer for service assurance has also been appointed. Now these are all in-house appointments, apart from the assistant director, of course. But so it does leave a an open vacant post that we still need to backfill. In addition to that, there's also inspectors that we are still currently in the process of appointing. The paperwork is currently being processed and going through relevant governance criteria before we can get out for advertisement. And I think that's it really. There's the rest of the items I was going to touch upon are in Appendix 3.
Right. So, okay, thank you for that. So, look, I think it's worth having a discussion on the open reports, certainly. Anyway, I've got. So, I'll just take hands. Can I ask specifically who wants to speak on the open report and who wants to speak on the closed report? So, on the closed appendices. So, Sue, is that an open? As far as well. Yes. Okay. Are there any other hands for Mike for the open section? Any other hands for the open section? And is there anybody who knows they're going to want to speak on the closed appendices? Okay, so let's just start as we go. Sue.
Thank you for this update and report. I've got questions on 2 of the paragraphs. The first one is on 2.11, which talks about the backlog of defects, repair of defects, and it says that it shows the backlog is not reducing, but we acknowledge that this may well be due to recent weather conditions. And I just wonder, as the weather improves, which hopefully it will get drier, when will we be reviewing this to make sure that that was the reason and that things are actually improving? And my second comment is on 3.1, which is just where you talk about the road condition, which has shown a slight decline, but still better than many other places. Obviously, when you've got a slight decline, that doesn't sound too bad, unless it becomes a slight decline that is repeated and becomes an ongoing decline. So can you offer me some reassurance that we will be picking it up if it doesn't improve again?
Okay, in terms of 2.11, there's an overlap between that and Appendix 3 itself in terms of what we've talked about in Appendix 3. But in terms of the backlog, yes, that's what we said in this statement here. What we've put in place is a monitoring program. So we're pretty much looking at it from a perspective of how that number is going down. So there are a number of reporting functions that Amey provide to us that is now there on that dashboard for us to monitor on a monthly basis. Now, if that doesn't go down, then we have agreed with Amey that we need to look at what else we can do now to intervene and get that to a point that we can manage it effectively. So that's our position really as it stands, because their position has been grounded in past data. So there's a justified. They've put adequate justification in place to provide additional resources. We've accepted that. We just need to now monitor it. And you're right about adverse weather conditions, and we're hoping for favourable weather conditions. We don't know if we'll get favourable weather conditions, so we'll just need to monitor that. If we don't get that favourable weather conditions, we have to then monitor and see what other methods of intervention we can achieve. In terms of 3.1, again, yeah, there has been a slight decline, a very slight decline, and I say that in terms of just 1 percentage point on each of these category of roads. So we do need to monitor that, because you're right. This could it just be a blip, or could it be that if we see next year's results, and does that have an impact? Now, obviously, we have to see those results next year, but notwithstanding that, we are still working with Amey to see how, starting with category 2 defects, those can be addressed, because it could be that that's also a potential factor that's led to this slight decline as well over that period, given that the defects were realised last year, and it coincides with these results coming in place as well. So we're hoping that there might be the same thing that's contributed to this slight decline.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for the report. on 3.4, you've highlighted that the practice of leaving bagged household waste at the side of street litter bins is accounting for much of the fly tipping in Sheffield. Now, I take it there's a separation from what we know is legitimate leaving next to bins by the various litter picking groups across the city, clearly we're getting some benefit from that. But it occurred to me that one of the things that goes on across some parts of Sheffield, and my own ward is not immune to it, and that's the burning of wheelie bins, at which point the householder has either got to pay Veolia £25 to replace the bin, or they may not have the resources, or they may just feel really angry about the whole thing, and they may have started just leaving their household waste on the street for streets ahead to pick up. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on whether I was probing in the right direction, or whether you think we might be we might need to look at other ways to address that. And then I'll come on to something to do with Fix My Street.
That's fine, Councillor. In terms of the feedback there, we've got anecdotal evidence from our enforcement team that actually the majority of properties where evidence has been found in these sort of bagged waste left at the side of highway litter bins, that actually the property holders have got all the relevant complement of wheelie bins on their premises, so it's not particularly ever been relayed to us that this is due to individuals who've had their wheelie bins burned, stolen or otherwise removed from their possession.
So it is.
I mean, sorry, just to follow up that, because I know I've got other hands. Could it be a question of capacity, of not having enough space in the black bin? I know we have a waste strategy coming up, which will be looking at questions of capacity. I don't think any of the options before us are actually to increase black bin capacity, but I know it's a significant element of my inbox is that people saying, look, my black bin isn't big enough, whatever the reason is, or occasionally it's a recycling bin that's not big enough. So, I mean, I don't know how, you know, if it's a significant part of the city's fly tipping problem that the bins are not big enough, then should we not, is it not the most cost-effective way to deal with that, to provide bigger bins where they're needed?
Yeah, provisions already in place for our waste management contract with Veolia to provide larger wheelie bins for larger households if there's a certain number of individuals living in the property. Obviously, it's potentially a reluctance to engage with the local authority and advise how many people are actually living in a premises, or perhaps it's just, you know, the other barriers to communicating with the local authority, but that's something that obviously Veolia client officers would have to comment on.
Yes, obviously, yeah, I'm well aware of the policy because it's a feature of my inbox. It's just possibly that it doesn't go far enough in meeting the waste needs as often as it does. I think it seems to be the issue. But okay, sorry for that.
Well, if I could just come back.
Yes, carry on, Mike. Sorry to interrupt you there.
It does beg the question whether we should be looking at sourcing fireproof bins, as my colleague here, Councillor Maya Richards has whispered in my ear.
Councillor Richards, you mean?
Whoever.
So yes, you're right there. But it's a serious point because we know this does go on. You could even suggest that it's a gateway activity for potential arsonists, that they enjoy setting light to wheelie bins.
I mean, Mike, thank you for raising this. I think we're possibly straying from accountability of Amey on the performance of their contracts with this. I mean, it's an important issue.
But from the point, Chair, from the point of view of waste and street scene, we are managing two separate contracts, but there is clearly an intersection here that we've not really sat down and looked at before, and it might be worth exploring, if not in June, then certainly sometime.
Yes, okay, no, I accept that. Richard, can we add this to our discussion about the thing, this interaction between the waste problem and fly tipping? Yeah, okay, thank you.
The arson.
Yeah, and the arson, yeah. Yeah.
If I can just come on, it was just a simple question really about Fix My Street and whether we're interacting better with it, because clearly there's often, in the past there's been delays in picking up correspondence that comes through from Fix My Street, and just wanted to know if we were getting better at dealing with that.
Yeah, I'm pleased to report that we've got an integration now working in the background between the council's customers engagement software and Fix My Street reports that are coming in. We've now got a third of all call traffic to the Streets Head contract coming in through Fix My Street, and I believe we're now running at over a 99% accuracy in terms of things being dealt with instantaneously, so there's only a very small amount of jobs now falling where it requires a human intervention with it.
Thank you. I've got Mark, Alexi, and Shoned. I'm gonna jump the queue actually and butt in at this point myself, just because I want to. I know. Because I just want to. I do hope we can focus on the. I'm not trying to dismiss anything that the issues being raised, which are really important, but I want to focus on some of the big questions about the accountability and performance. And I appreciate there's data in the closed appendix, I don't want to go there, relating to specific challenges, which I think we need a little bit more time to see whether the responses to those challenges are going to work or not. So I'm not going to talk about those. I just want to say, I mean, my perception that lots of people who talk to me is that, look, we spend a lot of money on the roads. We had very nice roads in the city for a few years, but now a lot of the services, even relatively new ones, do seem to be breaking up in lots of places, and it seems to, it gives the impression, whatever the stats say, it gives the impression of a service that is now failing to deliver, and in a slightly baffling way, because people say to me, how much is it costing the council that this service breaks up after 6 months, or this pothole that's been repaired, you know, it fails within months, or sometimes within weeks or days. And of course I say, well, it's a fixed price and it's Amey, and it's baffling how this can happen if it's at their cost to go back and fix it again. And roads that are new, but the surface has come away from the base layer, we're slightly baffled how that can happen. So I don't know, is that perception correct? Is it wrong? Is there an explanation for why we're in this position where Amey don't seem to be recognising it's going to be their own cost to put these things right?
Right. I think so. Amey have a contract. They're accountable on the contract. Now, from a contractual point of view, they are required to definitely address all the Category 1 defects. So they get addressed quite quickly. But there is a public perception in terms of how that does get addressed. So, without going into the engineering details, but you know, you would generally undertake a quick fix repair to make sure that the road is safe in the first 24 hours, and then they obviously are obliged to come back later on, you know, under a planned approach to do a fully conducted repair. Now, under such circumstances, in my experience, that has typically gone, given, you know, from a public perception point of view, it does look like, you know, what is a contractor doing, coming in, you know, one day and then coming back again a couple of weeks later to do the same repair. And, you know, and perhaps it's something we need to look at with Amey in terms of how we communicate that. That's one aspect. That doesn't necessarily address the whole question that you're asking, but there are individual elements to all of these. In certain areas, Amey would look at the failure or the issue from a treatment perspective, which is to try and just get in there and treat it as quickly as possible and get the road operational. You know? Now, there are questions whether or not that, you know, what kind of strategy they're adopting, whether it's a long-term strategy to retain the long-term structural integrity of the road, or if it's just to keep the road functional and operational in the short-term period. These are strategic kind of issues which we will need to talk to Amey about, and how that gets addressed. I can't answer that in terms of what is the best way forward. You know, each one has its merits and each one has its disadvantages, you know, in terms of, you know, if you're looking at long-term structural integrity, you're talking about a long-term construction program. So obviously more disruption. And it is very, I think the point I'm trying to get to is very hard to get to that optimal location, you know, where we can satisfy the, you know, public expectations because of the way because of the strategic decisions that are made.
I mean, I appreciate, yes, okay, I appreciate that answer. If the contract only had like 1 or 2 years left to run and new services were going down and then failing quickly, you know, we'd all be saying, well, look, they're about to leave, they don't care, they're going to dump all these extra costs on us. What's slightly baffling is this is happening and there's still, you know, over 10 years left to go on this contract. And if it's this bad now, then is it only going to get worse when we are only 1 or 2 years away in terms of just the quality of a job, of a complete resurface, quality of the job done. And maybe it's not as common as the perception is, because we notice the ones that fail, don't we? We don't notice the ones that are still good after a number of years. But, you know, is it going to get worse as we get to the end of the contract? If you have a crystal ball, or is there a conversation that you can have that could, you know, that will make sure that it doesn't get worse?
It's a conversation we've already initiated. We want to know, you know, what our strategic direction is. That's something we certainly, we're all in it for at the end of the day. We're hoping it doesn't end up in the way, you know, like in the way you're stating, but we need to make sure that we avoid that. Now that's a combination of a number of factors, right, in terms of what the contract stipulates, and then what we can get with our in terms of our conversations with Amey as well going forward. And that's part of that whole overall conversation as well, especially regarding the lower category defects that we've been having a conversation about, because the numbers are quite high, and you know how we go about even treating those as well needs to have a focus on the long-term integrity of the carriageway itself as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go back to the hands. We have got about 20 minutes left, I think, unless just under 20 minutes. If we can do that, we can finish on time without extending. So we can aim to do that. Mark.
Thank you, Joe. I'll try and be brief. Thanks for the report, and welcome to the post. It's not your first appearance here, is it? So, but you're still welcome, and it's still good to see you, and I hope everything's going well at the moment and you're enjoying it. This report is really, really helpful. We've already heard today that we're hoping to spend more money on tackling fly tipping. Obviously, Amey are a significant player in this role and a partner in delivering our responses. It's not just about us enforcing, it's also about them doing their bits. When we brought in £500,000 measure to tackle fly tipping previously, we bought a lot of cameras for doing enforcement, and Amey then stepped up and did some more. So would we be expecting, are we having those conversations with Amey about, we're going to put a bit more in, can you put a bit more in? That'd be really helpful to kind of like leveraging it, effectively extra investment for the council and improving our city. But also additionally, item number 3.6, we talk about the experiments that we're doing. I really, really welcome these. I am kind of wondering about how we have a contract with Amey. These experiments are possibly looking at changes and variance within that contract. Are we expecting additional costs from them? Because that is also... It's right that we ask the question, are we doing this as best as we can and can we do better? But then there's also the bit that we maybe need to be mindful of, that may actually have a cost to us going forward. Is that something we're seeing? Is that something we're cognizant of already? The leaf clearance work also covered in 3.6. Do we think that's working? Is that progressing at a sufficient pace, and is that working for all of the city, not just targeted areas? And finally, 3.6, the review of structures and measuring scrutiny. How do we measure that we're scrutinising the contract well enough? What metrics have we got in place to say, actually, we are reviewing this contract appropriately, and we've got enough officers to make sure we're reviewing this constantly? What are your thoughts on that? Certainly as a new service manager, how do you think it's going so far, I guess?
Right, first of all, thank you very much for the welcome message. And yes, I am enjoying the role so far, which is good. In terms of street cleansing, No, in terms of street cleansing, my colleague David Wayne is here. He'll provide some guidance on it. But one thing we have picked up on, especially where I'm sitting as well as my initial sensation is that, we've trialled it. Having a walk around city centre, the heart of the city, it looks very positive. Yeah. We've undertaken certain trials. We're conducting trials as well in Fir Park area. There's a lot of effort being undertaken there. There's still challenges. We've got a frequency, which I think is a reasonable frequency, but it's, the littering still does catch up with us, and we probably need to have a reasonable approach in terms of what would be the sustainable approach to that, because we've put a lot of staff, Amey have put a lot of staff in that area, but it can be within 2 weeks that you'll see some litter back on the street. Is it reasonable for us to then increase more resources? It's something that's a conversation need to be had, but I'll let David to then address some of that in more detail.
Yes, obviously you've raised the point of, I'm answering. Try again. You've raised the point of cost implications. Obviously, the contract was drafted, many, many years ago, sort of the mid-early 2000s. We need to appreciate that these trials are representing the fact that the city's moved on. There's been a lot of development, a lot of change, a lot of cultural change in how we use the highway environment, a lot of development in the city centre, completely changing the way we use these spaces. We've been fortunate that the Onion model just reallocates existing resource in more creative ways and in more sort of zonal ways of working, taking account of the different ways we're using these spaces. For the wider trials in the rest of the city, it may transpire that we need more resource than we've presently got in street cleansing to meet those aspirations. Obviously, that's something we're discussing with Amey at the minute as to how we would achieve that. You also mentioned leaf clearing. I think it has been a lot more successful than in previous years. There's been a lot more resource put into it. I think a lot of the pitfalls this year have actually been around communication, because we cited specific streets where the teams would be operating. People took an absence of their street being listed as being that they would get no input, and I think that's actually been the main failing rather than operational delivery this year, and that's something we'll look at moving forward for next year.
Thanks. I was going to say, I very much welcome the preemptive leaf clearance in flooding hotspots, because that is, I think, that's saved. So, Richard, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just to back on what officer said, Councillor, on your question around have we got the competency and the resources within our team, we've commissioned, as part of the Lowcock inquiry, of course, from last year, the Association for Public Service Excellence. They're coming in to do an independent health check of our service and how we're managing them, leading the contract. So we'll get that in the next few months, and obviously we'll share with members as and when.
Thanks. Alexei.
Thank you, and yeah, welcome to the post again. Look forward to working with you, hopefully. And thank you for the report. It was really useful. One thing I would pick out is that Sue touched on earlier was that one of the reasons for decreased performance was cited as adverse weather. I think given that we're in a climate emergency and things are probably going to get much worse, I'm just wondering who bears liability for that in terms of, we're going to have more extreme heat, we'll probably have much more water, so more flooding, we'll have more wind, so that's going to affect like the street furniture and the trees as well. So is it Amey that would have to meet that liability to maintain the highways, at the standard that they're contractually obliged to, or is the council going to have to meet that liability in terms of climate change? But also some other things that maybe not that impact the highways that are not climate change, such as increased amount of cars and the increased size of cars that are on the road, and also cars driving and parking on footpaths, which break because they're not designed to have cars on, and that's another reason for rising costs.
My goodness, Alexei, if it turns out a private company has to pay the cost of global warming, does this mean you'll be converted to the cause of PFI? Sorry. Do answer his question, not mine.
First of all, thank you very much for the welcome message again. In terms of a blanket statement, I can't make that blanket statement in terms of what, as an Amey will take on the whole responsibility. I think it has to be a case-by-case basis. If it's, for example, carriageway repairs, it's under their contract that any unsafe defects needs to be repaired quite quickly, regardless of the quantum of those defects. Now, that quantum is obviously, some of it is attributable to adverse weather, so that may be the case, but they are still contractually bound to repair those. So there will be certain items, certainly under the contract that they are responsible for. Now, there are some, other exclusive items which nothing comes to my mind, but I'm hesitant to make a blanket statement nonetheless about, that there may be some exceptions that they may make a case against and say this falls outside our scope, and we perhaps just need to take cognizant of that, and we'll just see how that how that goes, because it'll be a case-by-case basis really from that point of view.
So that potentially a financial risk to the contract to Amey.
I mean, my view would be that Amey should have anticipated global warming when they agreed the terms of the contract, and they should continue to deliver for the price. But
so I did have another question about reporting. So I think footpaths and road surfacing has been in the same group, but it would be really useful to see that split up in future to see if the response rate or responding to category 1 or 2 defects is the same on footpaths as it is in roads, to like split that up in future. And then just one final thing, is there scope within in the contract, if members decide to go that way, to vary frequency of street cleansing so that particular hotspots on a different cycle to areas that maybe don't need as frequent?
I think in short, obviously the East Trow and Darnell that we're looking into at the minute is effectively that, listening to elected members and members of the local community and seeing where they want demands to be, or where they perceive demand needs to be met. I'm not particularly keen on teaming and labelling a robbing Peter to pay Paul. I know that one or two people say, well, just take all the people out of Totley and Dore and put them in Attercliffe or Darnell. And that's not the approach we're going to take. We've got legal responsibilities to maintain baseline street cleanliness.
No.
We've got obviously legal responsibilities under the Environmental Protection Act. We've got to meet the DEFRA code of practice for delivery of these services. So effectively, we are discussing this proactively with Amey at the minute, how we meet that demand and how we provide something that's more responsive to what elected members, local area committees and other people at community level feel they need to point the street cleansing in a specific direction or way.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes left in the meeting. I wanted to give the last word to Sinead. No,
sorry,
indicated no. Sorry.
I just wanted to answer your first question about the separation of footway and carriageway and roads. We'll look into that, and in my experience, I've never come across it being split, but nonetheless, it's something that can potentially be done. The way we inspect the carriageway and the way we inspect footways there's a separate way of doing it. So there's an opportunity to have a look, certainly, and we'll liaise with Amey to see if that can be done.
Thank you. So you're saying, Sean, you didn't want to speak, so I saw your hand earlier.
I know that's really disappointing.
But
I realised that it was the Veolia contract I wanted to raise, and that is not this one, and therefore I'm not going to ask it.
Right, okay. Mark, did you say you wanted a very, very brief comment here, and then we'll...
Just a nerdy element. Street lighting. When we started dimming the lights, it was widely welcomed as a carbon saving. However, there is some element about the LEDs we use at the blue shifted end of the spectrum. That light does perturb people's sleep patterns, perturb wildlife and biodiversity and everything else. Are you aware of anybody else moving towards almost the more traditional arc lighting red end of the spectrum? And would there be carbon implications of that, because they're not as efficient and the amount of energy they draw down may be greater? it doesn't necessarily need an answer now. It's just something that popped into my head. It's conversations I've had with other people, certainly with regards to.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think we have discussed it in the past. It's one for a briefing. It's not an issue of accountability, so I'm not going to put that to the officers. I'm going to draw this to a close. Are we agreed? Can we agree the recommendations in the report?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, that's all agreed. Thank you very much. That was the final item on the agenda. A couple of closing remarks before we can all go. It is Shannon's last meeting, I am told. So goodbye. I was told at the beginning Shannonn would be very badly behaved, but you've done very well. So thank you so much for that. I'm also aware that Sarah is leaving the council at the end of the week. So I'd just like to thank Sarah for her support for this committee. It was last year you were actually assigned to us, but I believe we can blame Andy Burnham for this, as we can for so many other things. But again, thank you, Sarah, for your support for this committee over the last of the previous year. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody at home, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Cheerio.